Grace, peace, and welcome to Podcast of the Wills, a podcast that treats Star Wars like a sacred text. I am Nick Milkey. It's Sunday night, and it's time to hang out. It's time to have a drink. It's time to talk Star Wars, and I'm so excited. We have such a fun guest tonight. I can't wait to get into things with him, to get into the list that we have tonight. I am super thankful that you're here to join me. We've already got folks in the live chat. I see Galanorian Saber. I see Scarif Scuttlebutt, which I think is Roe. I see Framey. I see who else is here? Matthew's here. Raven's here. So glad y'all are here hanging out tonight. I hope y'all are excited to hang out with us, chat Star Wars. One of the things that I love about doing this podcast, and my wife asks me all the time, she's like, who really watches this thing? She means it with love, of course. But there's a part of me that doesn't really care who watches. I am thrilled that y'all are here, but this gives me a chance to talk to fun Star Wars guests, people who have worked on a Star Wars, which is one of our guests, which is our guest tonight. But it's the chance to make connections. It's the chance to meet people, make friends in the chat, friends that I've made, some of them who live in the same state that I do, some of them that live on the other side of the country. And so Star Wars brings people together. Star Wars is a community. I'm so thankful for this community. And we have talked a lot within our Star Wars podcasting community over, I don't know, the last however many months. We've been in a global pandemic for a year now, and the ability to connect with people when we're staying home, when we're being careful. This is a gift. This is a gift, at least for me, to be able to hang out, to chat, to go watch other people's shows, to make friends in the live chat, and just connect with people about something that we love. And so I love my Star Wars family. We talked the other night on the Force Connect show. If you missed that, there was a lot of talk about found family, which I think is such a prevalent storyline throughout so many parts of Star Wars. And this is a found family too. And so I'm thankful for this found family, and I'm thankful to hang out with y'all tonight and to bring our guest in. I'm going to tell a quick story as a way of introducing our guest. My guest tonight is a gentleman named Yoshi Vu. Yoshi works in visual effects. I know his title is that he is a senior generalist, and I'm going to let him straighten me out on all the titles and duties and all that kind of stuff in just a minute. But Yoshi was on the Around the Galaxy podcast back, I think, last summer. And on that show, they did a giveaway, and it was Pete does the 10 questions. And if you write down the 10 questions, message it to him, somebody would win a prize from Yoshi. And so I was lucky enough to win. And what I won is, and I can do this without getting the glare on it, is I got this print, and it is from a scene in The Rise of Skywalker that Yoshi worked on. He autographed it. He mailed it to me, and I put it up out here in my studio, and it's one of my treasured Star Wars collectibles. And it was so nice, and it made me so happy. And so I sent him a thank you note because I was raised primarily in the South. I have a grandmother who would chop my hands off if I didn't write anyone a thank you note for any gift or anything I ever got. And so I just wanted to. And so I sent him a thank you note. And out of the blue, like 3 weeks ago, I was sitting in bed one night looking at Twitter, and a message popped up on Twitter from Yoshi. And he said, I just want you to know you have a special place in my office. And he had framed the thank you note in the envelope that it came in, and he put it up. And it touched me in a way that I thought, this is a person who appreciates kindness and positivity. And thinking about that story, it got me to thinking as I was getting ready for tonight, I've heard these stories about Yoshi from other people too. I know Framey is in the chat, and they did a trade with Yoshi for I think it's a Rise of Skywalker or Last Jedi DVD or Blu-ray that he didn't have. And he insisted on sending them something. So he sent him a poster that he had signed. I know he helped Shannon last summer with the What Star Wars Means to Me as a Father video that she did. And he was in it. And I think he did some, visual effects work for that. And so every time I talk to somebody, I talked to Pete the other day, and he just couldn't gush enough about how nice Yoshi is and what a great addition he is to Star Wars fandom. And we talk a lot on this show about the hashtag spark of positivity. And to me, Yoshi embodies that. And I don't know him that well at all. We've messaged back and forth. He's super gracious to come hang out with me tonight. So that means he's got to be a good guy. But I'm thrilled to introduce and bring on my new friend Yoshi to hang out and talk with us tonight. Good evening, sir.
Hey, how are you?
I'm fantastic. I'm so glad to see you tonight. I'm glad to have you on the show. And I hope you didn't mind me fawning a little bit, but I think people need to be, people need to be recognized when they do good stuff, and it's important. because there's so much toxic stuff in the world. I know I follow you on Twitter, and
it.
sometimes, like everybody else, you get, beat down by the world, get beat down by, the toxic nature of what social media in particular can be. And so the fact that you go out of your way to spread kindness and positivity in the world means a lot. And so I want to say thank you. I also know, I think I heard you talking about maybe on that Around the Galaxy interview a while back, you auctioned off a bunch of your memorabilia to raise money for charity. It was something that you kind of stopped and said, I could keep this, or I could use it to put some good out into the world. And so again, that's the kind of stuff that the Star Wars family is really about. And you're a great example of that. So thank you. And thank you for hanging out tonight.
Well, I hope I live up to the way you just described me there.
I don't have any doubt. I don't have any doubt that we're gonna have a good time.
I'm sure there's more than a few people that might disagree. I can be a jerk at times.
Well, that's okay. You've got lots of people already in the live chat that have got your back, so I think we're in good shape.
Oh, awesome. That's great.
Well, and before we get into any more of our conversation, the other thing that I've been doing, and I keep laughing every time I say it, is that I am trying to become the Stanley Tucci of Star Wars podcasts. For everybody that's watching, Stanley Tucci's been doing these Instagram videos from his very finely appointed kitchen where he's making drinks and he's got like a blazer and a bow tie and, just looking very regal. And I thought, I can do that too. I like drinks. I host a Star Wars podcast. Why shouldn't I do that? So I've been doing that over these last 7 or 8 weeks, and I am making a drink tonight. The goal is to make a drink and name it after my guest. And so what I've got tonight, and I always have to try and do this without dumping it on my computer. As always, I've got a vintage Burger King glass. Some people would be ashamed that I'm drinking out of it, but I think it needs to be used. And the lead paint that's in it, I'll just try my best to recover from that one day. So I'm gonna get some ice in here. And what we are making tonight, I have named this the Generalist and Tonic, because Yoshi is a senior generalist. There's a little pun. I'll put the recipe up on Twitter when we get done. I want to shout out to New Amsterdam Stratosphere Gin. They're not a sponsor, but if you want to be, give me a call. We could make that happen. It says 2 ounces. I'd be a terrible bartender because I just like to pour it into a glass and we go from there. So we've got some gin. We've got some pineapple juice, hence the gin and pineapple. And then we're going to top it off with, it says seltzer. We have a lot of the Costco LaCroix drinks in my house. So we're going to go with a little lime Costco seltzer type situation. And I have made a Generalist and pineapple. And cheers to you, sir. Cheers.
I should have grabbed a glass of something.
That's all right. Thank you for being here and putting up with that ridiculousness. I want to talk just a little bit as we get started. I want to talk about your Star Wars story, but what I did not say up front that I should have is that I call you a visual effects artist. I apologize if that is not necessarily the correct terminology. But I wanted to run down for our guests just a handful of the things that you have worked on. And I want you to talk about any of them as we go along if you want to. But just a short list of many, many things. You have worked on Star Trek. You have worked on The Walking Dead. You've worked on Fear the Walking Dead, Venom, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I see that maybe you worked on an episode of Game of Thrones, the Green Lantern movie. And then especially pertinent to this audience, you worked on a little thing we call The Mandalorian. And you also worked on a little thing we call The Rise of Skywalker. You've done a little bit of all of it, and I'm so fascinated by that. I love behind the scenes stuff. I love hearing how these things get put together. Tell us a little bit, first of all, about your Star Wars story, how you got to Star Wars, but then certainly how that connects to this awesome work that you do.
It started with Muppet Babies, as I'm sure you've heard me say before. It's myself and a lot of other people my age, I'm sure, or around my age, probably were first introduced to, or at least did remember seeing clips of Star Wars in Muppet Babies. Especially there's, I think in the title sequence, there's a little clip, and just not being sure what that was and having to ask my parents, what is that? What is that? My dad says that's Star Wars, and of course that's how it started. We had to go to the local. It was like a grocery store that had a video rental corner, I guess you could say. Mm-hmm. You'd have to go in and we rented the VHS, and that was it. I was sold, hook, line, and sinker. I mean, it's laser swords, space battles. What kid wouldn't love that,
Absolutely. Yeah, it's so I have heard you tell that story before about the Muppet Babies, and even just now when you said that about the corner of the grocery store with the video rentals, that brings back such a memory for me. Even in the South, at our Winn-Dixie or at the Food World or wherever the grocery store was, that was such an age of like, yeah, there were video stores, but sometimes they'd have their own little corner, and you could get it from there instead of going to Blockbuster.
The one I went to, I believe it was called Randall's.
Yep, I'm familiar with Randall's.
Because I'm from the South originally too. I was born and raised in Texas, so
okay,
I
excellent.
grew up
Yes,
there. And then I think they shut it down and changed it to an HEB.
Yep. See, there you go. It's always changing, always in motion. The future is. I think that's what we learned in Star Wars. But yeah, so you saw Muppet Babies, and it was something that, of course, you wanted to know more about it. Like you said, it was laser swords and space battles. Why wouldn't we want to know more about that? So you watched Star Wars. You at some point, grew up with that, and then I know at one point you served as a Marine, and
yes.
That's an important part of your story, and certainly thank you for that service to our country. But I know that you kind of went from there, and you had connections with friends, and kind of saw hey, he's doing that, I could do that kind of thing too. And talk about kind of your entry, into visual effects, and especially how that was informed by Star Wars.
It's one of those things where I was always had a knack for art. I doodled a lot as a kid. I used to sketch a lot. I was really big into all forms of art, clay sculpting, wood carving, you name it. Anything that was artistically related, I wanted to try and be a part of. But I never thought that it could be a career. It seemed completely unrealistic. Like the idea of working on a movie is just so far out there, especially for a kid, who was born and raised in Texas growing up there.
Sure.
That's a million miles away, a million years away. That's never going to happen. But we ended up moving to California anyway. I became really good friends with a guy in college. We went to art school together. And after we graduated, I actually couldn't graduate originally. I think I got kicked out or something, or I dropped out. But no, I got kicked out for sure. I missed a bunch of classes and I got kicked out. My family was going through some hard times at that moment. So I was helping out with the family business and not attending class. Long story short, I had to go back and continue. And when I went back, by the time I went back, he had already graduated. I actually joined the military to try to, get the GI Bill and all that stuff. I thought would be helpful. And I ran into him again. I'm like, oh, what are you working on? He's like, oh, I'm working on Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. And I'm like, wait, what? Like, how is that possible? I mean, we were collecting comic books and cards and you're working on a real Star Wars project? And he's like, oh yeah, I graduated and I found a job. And I remember thinking like, well, if he can do it, why can't I? And that really pushed me to go back and, finish my education. And now with the GI Bill, obviously it was a lot easier, but I finished my education and the next step is history. I basically just kept working on my artwork in my free time because obviously coming out of school, that wasn't at the skill level I needed to be in order to get a job. So I just kept working on it on my own. Finally, an opening happened up at his studio for Green Lantern and Journey to the Mysterious Island. Those two movies were being done simultaneously at his studio, and they needed another 3D artist. I had already transitioned from 2D to 3D at that time, and he, hit me up and said, "Hey, are you ready?" I'm like, "Yep, I'm ready. Let's do it." And I think it was because of that, because of the fact that I had completed boot camp, and it was something that I thought would be, more difficult than it was. Not to say it wasn't super hard, but I thought it was going to be some terrifying event that nobody passes, clawing your way to the top. But it turned out it was something that I could achieve. And then after that, once I got to work on movies, those two things together made me realize like, wow, nothing is out of reach. I can do whatever I want as long as it's within, realistic parameters. I can do it. It's not like I'm trying to go out and be a transformer or, perfect light speed. So from there, I just kept going, like, oh, I want to work in games. All right, what do I need to do that? It should be just the same as anything else. I figure out what I need to be good at, how good I need to be in order for people to hire me for it. and I just worked at that,
Sure.
and being that I guess I'm naturally inclined to be artistic, it was just a
Hmm.
matter of figuring out how to adapt my artistic ability to each new medium or technique. So
Right.
nothing's impossible.
That's right. You can do it. Follow your dreams. And I think that
Believe
is
you
so.
can achieve.
That's right. Believe in yourself. But that's so true. And we laugh, and those are great. You know, the things that we say, I tell my kids, yeah, you can do that. You want to try and do something. But having goals, of being able to achieve those goals, being able to go after them. And I like for you being able to, see, all right, what's the next step? What do I have to do to get there? Instead of going, well, I guess this is the thing I'm going to be stuck doing. You kept pushing, and that, has taken you to some really amazing places. I know you told a story in another podcast about, it took you to Singapore to work on, was it Rise of Skywalker for
Yeah.
Singapore? And that was right around the time you were about to have a baby. And, there was all these things happening, but it was that continual push to be able to achieve something because one, you grew up loving Star Wars and now you got to work on it.
Yeah. I mean, it is true, like I think I might have mentioned it before or maybe not, but remember Shia LaBeouf put out that video where he's like, just do it. And
Yes.
it seems silly, but if you think about it, he's not wrong. Like
Mm-hmm.
really. And it goes back to, I was talking about my family's business. It actually went out of business anyway. It just
Sure.
collapsed. It was a video rental store.
Okay.
So obviously it didn't survive.
Thanks a lot, Randall's.
Right. Well, I mean, thanks a lot, Netflix, but
That's true. That did do it.
right. But yeah, I mean, it was a video rental store and it went out of business. But and I see this with a lot of different fields. People say, oh, this happened and now I'm out of a job, or they invented this and now we're out of work. And for me, I guess it's difficult for me to think that way because I don't think I have a job per se.
Right.
I have a set of skills that I can apply to different areas where I can get paid for it.
Mm-hmm.
I've had a lot of different jobs in my life. So it's one of, it's the old Marine Corps motto, adapt and overcome. So
Absolutely.
let's say I'm working on, I like I said, a video rental store that goes down. Well, what do I do now? What else can I do if not that?
Sure.
If and that's just the way I try to look at everything now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not to say I don't get down. There's lots of times where I feel like, oh, this is pointless. I quit. Like I'm so over this, but it's like Rocky says, right? It's not how hard you get hit. It's how hard you can
Yeah,
get hit and
that's
still
all right. How
still
hard
get
you
back
can
up.
get hit and still get back up. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and that's exactly it. And that's what life does to us. Life has done that over the last 12 months for a lot of people with, the challenges that the world faces, but we all get up, we dust ourselves off, we keep pushing forward because there is more to come and there is still the good, not only in the world, but the opportunities for us to be that. And you get to bring joy to so many people with the work that you do because we need movies, people need shows and games and, ways to escape things that we love and spend Sunday nights online on the internet talking about for an hour
Yeah.
or more at a time.
And that's kind of how I feel about it. It's like I want to. I know what it's like being on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
Waiting in line for autographs, waiting to meet someone that you don't even know what you're going to say to them. Like, what am I going to do when I meet them? There's
That's
you get
right.
a picture, and that's pretty much it. But it's we want to be connected to these things that we love, these properties we love, Star Wars, whatever it may be. And I longed for that connection. Like I
Mm-hmm.
love this. I want to put my fingers in it. I want to be a part of it. I want to be a part of that family, like legitimately. And it goes back to why I believe we collect, collectibles. It's because
Mm-hmm.
we have this prop, we have this replica. And when you see the movie, you can go, I have that here. It's mine. I'm like connected to the movie. And so the way I see it is, even though I'm connected in a small way, I'm not an actor, I'm not a producer, director. My name's not on the poster. I'm not, famous in the sense that, everybody knows people's names that work on these properties, but if it doesn't cost me anything, but a stamp and some printer ink or going to get something printed to sign something for someone and it brings so much joy, why not? Why not?
Absolutely.
I got to be a part of it. And now it's almost like I can break off this part that I have and share it with everyone.
That's so cool.
Why not do that?
Absolutely. I admire that so much. I think that's such a great way to look at it. And it's, look at what you've gotten to do and how do you get to bring somebody else in on that and share that with somebody else that, I don't get to sit down and be a senior generalist because I can barely make my computer work on my own most of the time, but I get the opportunity to, like you said, receive that print that you send me. And the fact that you signed it makes it even better to me because this dude worked on this thing and he shared
it's
it
still
with me.
crazy to me,
Yeah, exactly. And I can't imagine being in your shoes and having got to work on that. Well, let me ask you this as we're, still talking about what you do. And as we get ready to pivot into our top 7 list.
You got a lot of questions over here.
That's right. We're going to come back to some of these questions in a minute.
Cool.
But I want you to talk a little bit about the work you do as a senior generalist. Kind of a little bit about what that means and kind of, I know from listening to some of the other shows and talking to you, you work on certain things where, somebody else might work on, water, where you do hard. Talk a little bit about the work that you do, if you don't mind.
So as a senior generalist, basically the field is generalist, meaning as a 3D artist, I kind of should be able to do a little bit of everything to some extent. The idea is that if they hand me a scene, I should be able to handle it on my own without having to send something back. Like, for example, some other scenes might have like, oh, I'm making the environment. I need someone to give me this asset. I need someone to fix this for me. Or if that ship in the background is wrong, I need to send it back to the ship guy or the ship, girl or whoever is working on it and say, hey, Teresa, can you fix this? You need to change this. This has got to be red, so we don't have to do that. When you're a generalist, you get to fix everything on your own, and it saves a lot of time and it helps the studio out because you can create a more cohesive shot since you're able to adjust everything. Now, that means that for my specialty, I'm a hard surface specialist, meaning I do, mechanical, robotic, spaceship, sci-fi stuff. I'm able to do organic as well. I'm not as good at it, but I can do it. So I'm usually called in to do things like, like you see the Death Star ruins or, Orville, I did the pod ship thing.
Okay.
So that being said, there's some areas where even though I'm capable of doing it and I have done it on things for, TV shows, I do water and I have done water and liquid for TV shows. But for something like Rise of Skywalker, this is a big movie. I'm going to get, or the studio is going to get someone that specializes in it and is really, really good at it. And, case in point, they got someone amazing. The water looks great. You can see it's kind of murky. It runs off the ruins. It's great. It's beautiful. So, but generally speaking, that's kind of how it is. And the fact that I'm a generalist means that even if they bring in someone that's a water sim specialist, I know enough that I can still work with them. I'm not blind to what they're doing, and I can set up on my end to make their job easier, and we can kind of converse and work together. It also helps that I can, I can do a little bit of compositing. So if there's something that's not done on the 3D side, like, oh, I'm missing some beams of light, I can probably do that in post with compositing. I can set that up and then send that off to the compositing department, and they can see what I'm trying to do, and they'll probably do it much more efficiently and better. But generally speaking, I can kind of set up. I have, it's not just me, of course. The team. I was sitting around four other artists.
Okay.
And all 4 of us were working on different shots. 3 of us were working on the Death Star ruins, different areas. One of the guys to my left was working on the throne room, as well as the hallway right before the throne room leading into it.
Okay.
And a fun little fact, we had to put little stormtrooper helmets and stuff in there, kind of give it that rundown feel. But there was some debate going back and forth. Yeah, there are no skeletons in those stormtrooper armors. Like that's a little too dark. We'll just leave it at helmets.
That's right.
We'll leave, even though I think that would make sense. But
it would totally make sense. But I think I understand why they didn't go that way.
Yeah, it was so he did the throne room. Me and the other guy, we did the exterior as well as the entrance. So we kind of split that up, which you saw in my reel, the mouth of the ruins, if you know what I'm talking about, as well as the first shot on the inside, which was split between me and Mr. Throne Room. Right. Yay Cow was his name. But then the guy sitting right across from me, I felt sorry for him. He was doing the ice tunnel sequence. And my goodness, that was a ton of work. Even though you barely see it, it's going so fast, but there's all this ice. that the light is bending through, the light's refracting through it, and
a lot of light movement.
Yeah, a lot of calculations to do. So, and then I think the last guy, he was working on the guy that did the ice tunnel. He also did the crash sequence, not the crash sequence, with the crash landing with the Falcon, on the planet with the grass all messed up and all that. So he did that. And the guy across from me, he did one of the battles where they're running down the side of the Star Destroyers and stuff. So, so that being said, we're all sitting around each other and we can kind of bounce our ideas and techniques off each other. So we're all on the same page and we share assets like, oh, I see your piece in my background. Can you send me that? That kind of stuff. So
that's very, very cool. There's so much. And every time I've seen that, all those Rise of Skywalker scenes since hearing your interview and learning that you did all that, it's been one of those things. I'm like, I kind of know somebody who did that, and I'm paying attention to all the other details because you talk about, the TIE fighter that's in there, the helmets. I've heard you tell that before, and so I'm always looking for like those other, little bits, little nods, little things. We're going to get some questions at the end, but I did have one that I was going to throw up real quick just because it kind of connected. Framey said another question. They said, is there anything specific that Yoshi does in his work that identifies it as his, something perhaps we wouldn't notice, but he knows it's there? Are there any little Easter eggs or something that you're hiding in the stuff you do?
I do that from time to time. I'm not going to be specific about when and where, but I do from time to time. I would like to think I don't have a signature style or look because my job is to make it realistic. So if it isn't, I guess that's on me.
Sure.
But, I do have habits in terms of the types of patterns that I like, the type of paneling, things like that. So if you see some of my work, even on the Orville, things like that, you'll probably see. Oh, thank you, honey. Is that all of it?
Just about.
Okay, thank you. My wife got me a glass.
Nice. Look at that. Well, then here, we're going to do this again. Cheers to you,
Cheers.
sir. Excellent.
I think it's wine.
There you go. Totally legit. Totally.
But yeah. So I lost my train of thought.
That's all right. You were talking about lighting on the, some of the things that you would do that maybe you like a certain kind of lighting.
Yeah. Like I probably have specific types of panels that I like. Certain types of gizmos and patterns. So if you look through, you might see that. Because every artist has their own library of digital, I guess you could say, brushes or stamps that they like, that they use. Sure. So I've made my own panel stamps, so I can be like, bam, that's a sci-fi panel, things like that. So
on there.
Yeah, so I do use it a lot. I try to change it up, of course, but Absolutely. If anything, that's probably what you would notice. I do personal work from time to time, and so you can probably see more of my
stylize it a little more. That
yeah.
Way. Absolutely. That makes sense. Because obviously you're working on Star Wars, Star Trek, Shield, whatever it is, it has to fit within that environment and that genre and that whatever. So you can, maybe a way to put a spin on it, but it still has to make sense in that world. So I totally get that. Well, let's do this. We're going to move into our top 7 list. I've always, I joke all the time, like there's not enough lists in Star Wars. We're going to come up with one more. And so when I have my guests on each week, we do a top 7. There's no real reason for that. It just feels like the right number to do. And so I asked Yoshi, because I always want to try and tailor the list to my guest. I want to hit them, in their passion spot, something they're really, that connects with them. And so what I asked him to do for me this week, and he was so kind to agree to, is we're going to do his top 7 Star Wars visual effects moments. And I was really excited about this because I do want to hear from a visual effects expert. And I think I will say, I think
I probably call myself an expert.
That you're definitely an expert. We're going to do that. We've declared it right here and now. I think in the first email that I sent to you, I said something like special effects. And even after I sent it, I realized that special effects and visual effects are 2 very different things. That, there's some similarities, some shared whatever. So I think for the screen, we will go with visual effects moments and try to be a little more accurate as best we can. But we're going to jump right into number 7, and I'm going to get it up here on the screen, and I want to hear you tell us about it. But number 7, he has the Steadicam and blue screen Return of the Jedi speeder scene.
So, are we
Tell
just
us,
gonna
expert. Jump right in.
I mean, obviously, that has a special place in my heart. Just from nostalgia alone. That's this is speeders going through the forest. How do you not have that on your list? I mean, that was when they were getting better and better at it, and that was like a good use of the blue screen at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just a good example of an iconic scene that was part of basically Star Wars setting standards for visual effects.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
you can't really go wrong with that.
No, it's not. And that's one of those ones that always stands out to me when you watch any of the behind the scenes stuff, even from the original Star Wars movies, Empire of Dreams, all the stuff that we hear about from the original trilogy, the kit bashing that they do when they build, the Death Star models, and you see them in the back of a Jeep driving through a parking lot with a camera flying by. This scene is another one of those ones. And I remember, they shoot it. I think they shoot it slower so that they can speed it up to add that speed effect. And then you have them with the blue screen behind them, and the camera development's like, Steadicam. Was Steadicam not essentially invented for a lot of this scene right here? Is that right?
There was a lot of techniques that were perfected, a lot of fine tuning. We'll get to the next one, but there were things that were invented more or less for the films. Like Lucasfilm did.
Mm-hmm.
ILM specifically did invent a lot of techniques.
Absolutely. Well, and you talk about that, and as we jump into number 6, and I watched, and I'm going to put a YouTube link up in the show notes after we get done. If anybody wants to go and watch this video, and I'll put it on Twitter as well. Optical printing and the New Hope, trench run. There's a great little 5-minute YouTube video that kind of talks about what optical printing is. But tell us, for you, and especially for somebody who does what you do, about this and the importance of it.
So optical printing, it's basically what they used before green screen and blue screen.
Okay.
The simple, most layman way I can put this is putting your layers together. For example, in Photoshop or any program, you can flatten it and save out the image.
Right.
Well, with film, you can't do that. So the way to do it would be to basically, I guess you could say, copy everything over. You lay the multiple layers together and copy it or print it into one new strip. So it's one strip now, one film strip, as opposed to multiple. And with Lucasfilm, up until that moment, people had only done 1 or 2 layers. So I think Lucasfilm started out with, they were doing something with 4 layers. You guys can watch the video to get more info. But long story short, it was another milestone and something they created just to get the job done. And we wouldn't have the trench scene without it, which I don't think anybody can argue is iconic.
It is indeed iconic. It's still, even with the advancements and the things that we see in modern movies now, I go back and watch those things, and I'm sure I don't look at it with the same eye that you do, but I still go back and look at it and I go, I totally buy this. Like, it doesn't look cheesy. It doesn't look fake. It may not look quite as fast as it looks now, but I'm still going, no, I believe that. Like, they really did, make that shot where he swoops over backwards as he dives down into the trench. And that was something that was done, figuring it out as they went. It was, like you said, pioneering a lot of that technology, if not perfecting, techniques and things that were out there, but had just kind of been messed around with. And they're like, no, we're going to really make this work and use it. And it's so fascinating.
Yeah.
Well, number 5, we have Go Motion and the Empire Strikes Back Hoth battle. Tell us about Go Motion.
So, Go Motion, you guys are familiar with stop motion. Go Motion was basically a way of doing it to give some motion blur, better sense of movement, as opposed to the old what is it, Jason the Argonauts? Not that it wasn't great for the time, but
right.
Yeah,
that's one that doesn't hold up.
Yeah, it's a long story short, it's a advancement of stop motion, and we can't argue that it wasn't effective when you saw the AT-ATs fall over.
Yeah, it's that Empire Strikes Back, like most people, is definitely my favorite Star Wars movie. It's the one that if I can only have one for the rest of time, that's the one. And honestly, even for me, it's my favorite movie of all time, not just a Star Wars movie. It's my favorite movie of all time. And some of my favorite parts of that movie is the stuff on Hoth. And I love, the first time those AT-ATs are lumbering out of the distance and they're coming through whatever that snowdrift fog is. And you just see that thing like, that's scary as hell. And then they get closer and they're huge. And to see them fall, and I'll never forget that sound it makes as it falls over. And, it's like an airplane in a World War II movie crashing into the water or whatever. It had that same feel to it, which I'm sure inspired it. But to go back to some of those behind the scenes movies and footage and documentaries and things and see how they did that. And you've got a couple of dudes in a room with a model and they're positioning it. And like you said, stop motion, but go motion is better. And that's how they get to, show us this crazy stuff. Like, it's utterly fascinating.
It is.
Number 4 is so good. Number 4, K2SO and Rogue One. I mean,
that's pretty self-explanatory, right?
It is so explanatory. And I feel like I could write an essay just about K2 and Rogue One. And, he's such a good character. He's one of my favorite droids. But tell us again, for you, and I certainly love your opinions on these as somebody who works in this field. Talk about K2 and what made that, part of your list.
So for me, it was always tough to think that you would have someone as iconic or memorable as, R2 and C3PO, especially something that's, CG in a lot of scenes. I was worried, like people aren't going to accept this.
Right.
However, when you saw it, they did a beautiful job. It was outstanding. I couldn't really find anything to complain about. The character was lovable. It was a charming, charismatic character. Beautifully done. It felt like it fit the scene, had a Star Wars feel without being too similar to the other two droids. It almost had what was it? Oh my goodness, I'm brain farting. The medical droid. What is it? Like that kind of shape. It took a lot of cues from Star Wars.
Right. Yeah, it's so, and the technology of it, and it's such a leap to go from Anthony Daniels, who was literally buckled into that 3PO suit, or Kenny Baker inside the R2D2, like
turning the little
there, turning the head around. Like, that's amazing. And that got us these two iconic characters. R2D2 is my favorite character. 21B is the droid you were thinking of. That tall, the medical droid. But to have people in R2D2, to have somebody in C3PO, that works in a certain way, but it has to fit a certain body type, or the droid has to be a certain body. Like, they have to be able to be in a costume. And so if you want to expand, and I think, I'm pretty sure the K2 droid shape comes from some Ralph McQuarrie concept art from, the 70s. And so everything, a lot of the stuff he did was long and lean, like it was real tall. The stormtroopers in those were really tall, which I think is where the Death Troopers come from.
Yeah.
Some of that art style from Rebels, even, that they reuse some of that. But you can't do that if there's a dude in the costume. But they figured out a way to put a dude in the costume and actually make it play and make it work. And to have the actor and to have Alan Tudyk in there doing what he did and to bring his humor to it. Like, to me, it's just a win all the way around. But certainly I would think from a visual effects standpoint, the things that they did, there's the Rogue One, the documentary and the behind the scenes stuff, where they have him with like the backpack on that has the telescoping thing that raises up with the cardboard cut out of the face on it. So they knew where to put the eye line because he's not tall enough. Those little tricks to me are what makes it so good and what makes it, believable.
By the way, someone mentioned in the comments here, the Go Motion. Yes, it wasn't pioneered only by Lucas, but Go Motion was co-created by ILM, Lucasfilm, and Phil Tippett.
Okay.
He also did used it in RoboCop 2, RoboCop, stuff like that.
Excellent. Very, very cool. And I think about too with similar to K2 was also, yeah, Rose says, thank you, Jar Jar. There was definitely scenes of Ahmed Best with the Jar Jar stick above his head as well. But I would say also similar to K2 is what we saw in Solo with L3. And they put Phoebe Waller-Bridge in a costume, in a green suit, with the parts around her. And then they were able to, edit that out to give that character, again, a similar, like, it feels real, but there's a person in it doing it, which to me harkens back to like classic Star Wars, classic George Lucas going, we're going to put a dude in that costume, not just draw it on screen unless it's, the prequels. And then they drew everything on the screen.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't there for that. I was in high school. So
that's right. We're not going to hold you responsible for that.
Which is another reason why all of it seems so out of reach and unbelievable.
Absolutely. No doubt. Well, number 3, this is such a great one. The first time we see Lightspeed in A New Hope, that I can't begin to imagine. I do remember the first time I feel like I remember the first time I saw that, but tell me about, why it speaks to you, why it's number 3 on your list.
So visual effects wise, it's not very complex. It's a pretty simple, straightforward shot, but just seeing it for the first time blew me away.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously nowadays I look at it a little differently as an artist. I'm like, oh, that's just an interpretation, but at the time I'm like, is this what Lightspeed looks like? That's amazing.
This has got to be it.
I finally get to see what it looks like.
So, how did they get a camera in there to figure that out?
Like how did they get the camera to move that fast? So, I mean, for me, it was like, I guess it boils down to the joys that we have watching sci-fi in general. It's mm-hmm. This is the closest we might get to actually seeing something like this. If we can't see it for real, why not, use our imaginations, make believe, and, have fun with it, mm-hmm. things like that. But I do believe, I think it's is it some? I forgot the science website it was on, but warp speed is no longer a fantasy. So
it's something that has the potential to be achieved.
There's some theoretical I think there's some theoretical stuff out there that shows it's probably possible.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's cool and all. I'm excited, but I'd rather have a holodeck.
Absolutely. Let's just dial up whatever we want to and not have to go anywhere.
Right.
Yeah, Framey says that rotating blue light speed tunnel reminds me of something similar from a 1980s Doctor Who opening sequence. Exactly. Well, and it's neat too to see the little subtle changes that have happened with that light speed thing. What we got in, especially the despecialized original versions of the original trilogy, you get those points of light that, expand and you're in that thing. But now when we get kind of a more modern version of light speed, like in Rise of Skywalker, when they're doing light speed skipping, or, the animated version of Rebels, like you get the jump where the star lines stretch out, but then you have that time where you're actually in it, and it's more of like this kind of serene haze, and it's, they've been able to expand on it, and I'm sure and
there's a lot of stuff with that we fake, that, mm-hmm. I mean, I know there's a lot of science buffs out there who go, well, when they're in a blue tunnel, they shouldn't be casting blue light on the Millennium Falcon because it's, faster than the speed of light, blah, blah, blah. But, these are conscious decisions that were made.
Right.
Like, yeah, we know it's not accurate, but it looks nice. It's a pleasant story. And, some people forget that it's not always the same teams working on stuff, because
sure.
I joined the team for Rise of Skywalker, and then they're sitting there talking about, okay, we got to do this light speed tunnel for the Millennium Falcon, and putting in the older movies going, okay, we're not matching it. It's got to look the same, like, well, don't we have that file? Well, that was made in programs that aren't used anymore, like, 10 years ago by some guys that don't work here anymore or something like that. You never know. So it's not always as straightforward as people may think. It's like, I can tell you about a movie where we had to rush to get a trailer out, and we kind of faked the funk for the trailer. We kind of faked, I guess you could say, cards, the digital version of like basically cards and matte paintings to look like a spaceship. We're like, oh, okay, there we go. And then it's not Star Wars, by the way. I can clearly say that.
Totally fair.
Yeah, we did the trailer. And then now it's like, okay, now we bought some time. Now the movie's got to come out. It's like, well, now we have to make this spaceship that actually looks like it does in the trailer from that angle. So we have to work backwards now.
That's right. You kind of recreate the whole thing. Well, and you make a good point about, you know, what it actually doesn't look like, or the person who says, well, it doesn't really, you know what? We go back to that all the time in Star Wars, and we talk about how nothing is going to actually burst into flames when it explodes in space. But that's not fun to watch on a screen. Like, you need a little bit of flourish. This is
Yeah.
supposed to be your imagination. Like, that's
And
fine.
not only that, Luke and Leia should be different ages because of all that light speed travel.
That's exactly right. So we don't have to get hung up on that. It's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to look cool. And that's really where we draw most of the lines. Well, number two, this is a great one. And this one actually, to me, or not to me, it's true. In that YouTube clip you sent me, Jabba's sail barge in Return of the Jedi, that's kind of what they focus on in the optical printing clip. They use some examples of that, of the smaller skiff flying away from that as it explodes. But again, this is number two on your list. Tell us about that.
This was the one that really caught my attention as a child watching, because when the barge flies through the desert, you can see the shadows actually going over, all the little sand dunes and whatnot. And I remember thinking, obviously that barge isn't there. Someone went in there frame by frame and painted that, and they had to eyeball the perspective of the shadow. I want to do that. I don't know why I want to do that. Like, that looks like something I want to do. And, so I can't really put that any higher on the list than the next one.
Yeah. Well, and that's totally legit. And we're going to get there in just a second, but you're right. And I think for you too, for me, looking at that scene, that is another one of those scenes that stands out. I'll tell you what stood out to me. It wasn't as much the shadows on the dunes, and I'm actually about to pull Rose's comment into this as well, was when it exploded, all the things hitting the sand as they flew away, like the shrapnel. And apparently there was 100,000 nails stashed within that physical set that they ultimately blew up and recorded. And so I always go back to, and I can see it now in my head, as they're flying away and that thing is settling, like all the bits of stuff just hitting the ground. And I remember having a similar thought to you of, holy crap, like somebody really did that. Well, of course, in that case, they really did. They blew it up one good time and they filmed it to use. But like that attention to that detail, the chunks that flew out of it, like it had to look real. And there are all the tricks, whether you're doing, pyrotechnics and those kind of effects for a movie, or whether you're doing what you do, it's those little things. And I think, to me, and what I respect so much about what you do, and, I don't notice probably a third of the things that you notice when you watch a bad effect or something, but like we've all had a time when we've seen something and we go, that just doesn't seem right. Or that doesn't, the uncanny valley is the really extreme version of that. But even with a spaceship or, whatever it was that you're looking at and going, something just doesn't feel real. But Star Wars, even from the very beginning, has always felt real, lived in, the stuff they're doing with the Mandalorian. And of course, the volume plays such a big role in that, and having that, fully rotating, the way lighting, you talk a lot about lighting, to have that thing lighting something like a Mandalorian helmet like his, that's so shiny, like without some of those things, I can't imagine how complicated that would have to be to try and get it to match. And, like you said, the ice tunnel and that kind of stuff, like it would be all those calculations, all of that. And the technology continues to make it, I would think, more interesting. But I love where we are now with Star Wars, with the combination of the practical and the digital, that gives us something that takes the best of both of those worlds and gives us something that we go, oh yeah, I totally buy that. That's real somewhere. I just need to go there.
Well, Galaxy's Edge, right?
Exactly. I haven't been there yet, but I can't wait. I probably will pass out with excitement when my day comes. Well, let's get to number one, because there are definitely stories plugged into number one. And if our viewers didn't see this coming as number one, I'm sorry, but it's the best number one anybody could have. The Death Star 2 ruins on The Rise of Skywalker, because you, Yoshi Vu, did that. Like you were there, as we would say. I can't imagine how cool that is. Please tell us everything about that.
So that's obviously number one, because as I mentioned to you, I'm 100% biased on that.
And you
You know,
should be, and I
yeah.
support that
Which one's your
completely.
favorite?
Yeah,
Mine.
mine.
Think mine's the best. But so
No, it
that
is.
was one of those things, as I mentioned many times before. It was a dream come true. It still doesn't feel real. It still feels like when I do these podcasts and interviews, which is a new thing for me.
Sure.
Not that I haven't done interviews before, but after Star Wars, it just blew up.
Mhm.
Everybody's asking, "Hey, you want to come do a podcast or a panel, do a convention?" I'm like, "Sure, why not?" And it's still strange to me because it feels as though it does in the movie, which is a description I like to use, is that it's as if I won some cereal box contest to come work on Star Wars, and I got to do a little scene, but
Mhm.
it's not really part of Star Wars. Everything else is, and that's the contest winner section.
Right. It's the
You know,
contest winner. I feel you.
yeah, it's like when you watch a TV show and they have a guest star, and you're like, "Oh, this is a contest winner that won a walk-on role." Like,
Got to
yeah,
walk past the camera and that's it.
yeah, that's exactly what it feels like to me, and I can't describe it any other way. Even doing this, like you say, "Oh, I sent you that signature." I'm like, "Yeah," because it doesn't cost me anything. And I remember someone came to one of my signings and said, they had a pop figure of the child from
Mhm.
Mandalorian,
Right.
a big one. It was a big
The
one
big one,
too.
yeah.
He said, "Can you sign this?" And in my head, I'm like, "Why do you want me to ruin your collectible? Like, I don't get it." So I try to think, and I'm like, "Okay, I'll sign on the plastic because you can wipe that off with alcohol if you want to."
If you change your mind later.
Excuse me.
No,
So I
absolutely.
mean, for me, it's really strange, and working on that scene, I broke all the rules in terms of obviously they can't force me to work overtime, but I was more than happy to stay extra to do stuff that I didn't need to do. One of which was building out the TIE fighters,
Mhm.
because as you can imagine, they've probably been built 20 times over. They're sitting in a database somewhere. So, but instead of grabbing that, this is my one shot. Like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to make it.
Right.
Unfortunately, I couldn't make all of it from scratch as much as I would have liked, just due to time. But I made as much as I could, just so that I can look back and say, yeah, I did
That's
that.
mine.
That's
I did
right.
that.
Yeah, and I spent a lot of care looking through the cross sections books to see how the cooling tubes were were,
Mhm.
were structured and placed inside the TIE fighter wings. If you want to call them wings or heat, um, you know what I mean. But
Heat sinks.
heat sinks or heat dispersion, whatever they're
Mhm.
called. But I try to look at all the parts to figure out how they're made so that they break accurately. If this TIE fighter were to fall into the Death Star ruins here in this area, how would it break? How would it fray? How would the metal bend? What does it look like inside? So just being able to do that was, like I said, I'm beating a dead horse here, but a dream come true. I don't know what
No,
else to do. Maybe.
there's nobody here that blames you. In fact, my mind runs to, I love what you said about, yeah, I could go get TIE fighters from the library, or I could do it myself because I did it and because I want to. And I know what you mean about, you stayed extra because you're passionate about it. It's something that you love. It's something that you wanted to do. Nobody forced you. You went, no, this is what I'm going to do. And so my mind also runs to, like, the opportunities to do research. Like you said, you looked up, vent shafts and all that kind of stuff. Like, did you get to go, was there like did you get to go to the Lucasfilm warehouse that I've heard so much about where there's models?
Uh,
Did you get
well,
any of that?
unfortunately, I was in Singapore,
Okay,
so
that's right.
yeah, so that didn't happen. But I did have access to the digital library,
Okay.
which is they make it a point to have reference available to all the artists around the world. So everything in the
Sure.
archives is scanned in, and
Okay.
accessible through the company servers and what have you. So the when they told me that I could look through the database and I can go find the original, Ralph McQuarrie paintings, I could find the original matte paintings
Mm-hmm.
from Return of the Jedi and
Mm-hmm.
zoom in and see the paint strokes. And I'm like, what? Why wouldn't I do that? So yes, I'm gonna pull this
Yes,
up.
absolutely. You're going to
And
do that.
I didn't make it. I was kind of bummed about it, but you can't win them all. They were filming while I was working, and on one
Mm-hmm.
screen I had the paintings from Return of the Jedi up, zoomed in,
Right.
looking at all the the red scaffolding and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I was working, and they were bringing the camera around, and I'm like, oh, what's going on? They're like, oh, they're filming the behind the scenes stuff for the DVD, and I'm like, what? Am I going to be on the DVD? And I got to try not to look at it, like, oh, act
Right.
natural.
Just be cool, man. Just be cool.
And they did ask us a few questions, but it was known that obviously they're gonna not use everybody's. So that's unfortunate that didn't happen. That's okay. That's okay. It's okay.
Absolutely. No,
I
it's
don't want to get
totally
too greedy here.
That's right. You still
But
got to work on a Star Wars. It's a pretty big
yeah,
deal in and
and
of
the
itself.
big bonus was that at the end of it all, when I got home, one of my coworkers, one of my friends called me and said, "Hey, they use your assets in Star Tours." I said, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Well, they fly through the Death Star ruins on Star Tours, and obviously there's no reason to build it from scratch. So you've already built it. So they grabbed your stuff and put it in the ride. And now I'm super excited and terrified at the same time because I want my daughter to hurry up and grow up so I can take her on this ride. But at the same time, I'm like, don't grow up, stay small forever."
I totally legit. I feel you on that. But again, like Star Tours, man. Like we grew up with Star Tours and
Yeah,
I went as a kid. I haven't been in years, but I can't wait to go. And so now that's something else to look for, when I do get to go one day. And but it's so neat. And for you to be able to have that, and you're a dad, you've got kids, and your kids, as they get older, I'm so excited for you to have the opportunity to share those things with your kids and to be able to be like, hey, you see this? And, dad did that. Like, to me, that's such an amazing thing to get to pass on. And I'm excited for you for that.
yeah, I'm excited too. I'm hoping that they keep it there long enough at least so that my daughter can take her kids and maybe her grandkids, although her grandkids might be a stretch. You know how Disney is. They're probably going to switch it out and change it to something else. It's probably going to be like Avengers tours or something. I don't know.
That's right. That eventual universe crossover where Marvels and Star Wars have become all one thing, and
Right.
something wild like that. Well, if we can, in a minute, I want to go back to a couple of the questions that we got from our chat, but I also
Absolutely.
wanted you, if you would, that's a perfect number one. There's nobody here that faults you for picking that because you did it. You got to work on it, and that's an awesome number one.
Totally biased.
Can you talk a little bit about what you did on Mandalorian? I know you worked on Mandalorian a little bit, and I don't know if it was really official, but I know you did a little bit of something with that.
It wasn't because I was officially on the Rise of Skywalker team, and
Okay.
I'd requested that. That's what I wanted.
Sure.
Of course, why wouldn't you? It's the last Star Wars movie, the last Skywalker movie. So, but when I saw Mandalorian being worked on, I remember they're like, "Oh, hey, we need help. Some of these shots, we need a little assistance on. So we're going to, have you jump onto a couple of these shots." So I worked on chapter 4. It was the village where the ATST comes through the trees. That's one of my shots. Not the ATST. I did the environments where Cara Dune pops out of the water. I did that little grass water thingy, and I also did the village and the scene where Mando is looking out the window at the child playing with the other kids. That was one of those. That was a matte painting mostly.
Okay.
So that wasn't CG. It was a matte painting.
Is that the scene where he takes his helmet off?
Yes, he takes his helmet off and
on the
sets it
ledge.
on. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So obviously that green screen in the footage that window is just green screen in the footage. There's nothing back there, and so those are the 2 shots I did. But I was fortunate to work on it because the show ended up being great. So I'm like, I'm glad I worked on that. Because let's just say the fans of Star Wars have not been as kind to Rise of Skywalker, needless to say. But everyone seems to love Mandalorian, so it's okay.
Well, and rightfully so. And again, we talked about it at the beginning, but that positivity, we as fans, and you not only as a fan, but as a fan who worked on it, like the ability we have to crowd out those negative voices and to remember there's more of us than there are those negative folks. And so I'm always trying to push what we call #spark of positivity. Like it's supposed to be fun. If Star Wars makes me mad, I should be done. Like I shouldn't hang out if it makes me angry. Like, what am I doing here?
I never understood that. I've talked about that before on other podcasts. It's like, if you don't like something, like if I eat at a restaurant and I don't like it, I don't understand why anybody would stand in front of that restaurant for the next 2 days, 3 days, yelling about how terrible it is and how everybody that eats there is stupid. Like, like if you don't like it, go eat somewhere else. You don't have to eat there.
Nobody's making you be here. Nobody's holding you hostage.
They didn't run over your dog. Okay. Like, I don't get it.
That's right. They totally didn't. Well, I'm going to hit a couple of questions from the live chat, if you don't mind fielding some questions. This one comes from our buddy Ro. what would you tell a young Yoshi as an upcoming artist that you wish you had known when you were getting started?
You were right about everything. Keep going.
Keep going. I like that. Keep going.
Because there's a lot of times I wanted to quit. It just seemed so far fetched. I was like, I'm not going to make it. I got turned down for Lucasfilm, I don't know, probably 30 or 40 times.
That's right. I remember hearing you talk about that. And that's the thing. Keep sending those letters. I can keep sending them if you can keep sending rejections. So why not?
I mean, there's two ways to look at it, right? Either A, they rejected me because they don't want me, or B, they rejected me because I'm not good enough yet. And, and that's something I talk to a lot of people about, a lot of my friends, a lot of friends and family. And they're like, yeah, I can't do this anymore. Like, this is not for me, or this is too hard. Like, I just don't have the same luck, or I haven't had the same opportunities. I'm like, you got to go make it, man. You got to go make
That's
it.
right.
You got to make your own opportunity.
Well, and I'll throw this one up there because it's from my daughter, Lily, who her favorite movie is Titanic. And she loves when Jack says you make your own luck in Titanic. So that falls right in there with what you're saying. But Lily asked, what is your favorite art that you have made?
There's a piece I call Artemis Prime.
Okay.
It's a piece I painted for my daughter for her first birthday. It's on a canvas hanging in my mom's house, like in basically her play area, my mom's place when she visits. But that's probably my favorite piece. It's just a painting of a girl standing in front of a computer, looking up with a sword and shield, and the wall behind her has faded away, and there's a dragon looking down at her. And it's kind of like that fantasy feel. And I think I did that just because most of my work has been in sci-fi. So I wanted to do something fantasy.
Absolutely.
So that's kind of why I did that.
Well, and because you mentioned fantasy, and I mentioned this early on at the beginning, in your IMDb, it says you worked on one episode of Game of Thrones, maybe uncredited. Did you do some Game of Thrones something?
I think I just helped out with some textures or something, with some rocks in the dungeon. I didn't really do much.
Right.
So.
Well, that's okay. It's still Game of Thrones, and my wife and I are in the process of rewatching it right now, so it's fresh on my mind.
I haven't seen it.
Oh, wow. It's worth it. I like it. It's a good one.
See, that's the thing. I hear mixed things. I hear some people like, yeah, after the ending, it's not even worth it. Don't even bother. And
that falls into some of that. That falls into that same category we were just talking about. Sometimes people just want to scream too. Well, here's another question from Matthew. Matthew wants to know, who is Yoshi's all-time favorite Star Wars character?
Chirrut Imwe.
Nice. That is an excellent choice. What is it about Chirrut that speaks to you? Chirrut. I don't know if I'm saying it right.
I don't even know if I'm saying it right, to be honest. But
that's all right. We'll meet in the middle. Tell us about why that's a good pick for you.
This is probably cliche, but I guess representation. It was the first time I felt like kind of connected to Star Wars, because up until that happened, it was just, oh, this is a movie about people in outer space, and now it's like, oh, this is about humans. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I'm like, oh, this is about humans. There's like people like me in here. That works. I like it. So, and also, he doesn't really have much of a backstory as far as I'm aware yet, unless there's been books that came out that I haven't known of. But he's enough of a mystery that he can be interesting still, which with the expanded universe back then, and now that being Legends, and I don't know what's going on. There's so many characters that are so fleshed out. You have Evazan. You have freaking everybody has a backstory. So finally there's a new interesting character that has like some mystery. And of course, because Donnie Yen is the man.
I was just hitting you as you said it. Framey said exactly what you were saying. Donnie Yen made Chirrut such an incredible character, and also that heartbreaking end, and the way that Chirrut and Baze both, those two characters together, the way they supported each other, the way they, looked out for each other. That's one of the best parts of Rogue One, and Rogue One is stellar from top to bottom, in my opinion. So, to have those two characters, it's solid. You can't, there's nothing bad about that and about that character for sure.
Yeah. And it's an awesome character that doesn't use a lightsaber, that doesn't use force powers per se. It's like this is a character that's just awesome in his own right without having all these extra abilities.
Well, I've got another question here, and this is from one of my other daughters, and I say that because there's 4 of them. But Lily asked a question a minute ago. This is her twin sister Harper. Harper asked, who is your favorite character, which we just did. But she also said, what was your favorite set or favorite thing to work on? My guess is it was that Rise of Skywalker bit.
Yeah, hands down.
And hands down, nobody would doubt you for that at all. So, those are obviously, great. Raven's talking about Cheer It Still. She said, I liked how he seemed so familiar from the start. Like, he just starts talking to Jen while they're in the city, while they're there, randomly just talks to people. You got to love somebody that's just fine walking up to somebody and striking up a conversation.
Right.
I admire that because I'm not likely to be the one to do that. But when I see it in somebody else, I'm like, yeah, that's probably a good person. That's fine.
I'm sure you do. You've never seen someone with a Star Wars shirt and go,
well, yeah, there is a minute where you're like, hey, dude, nice shirt. And he's like, okay, thanks. I just picked it out of the drawer. And I'm going, no, but like, why did you pick that one? I go into nerd mode sometimes too much.
Yeah, I've done that too. And it doesn't always work out.
This guy's like, I was just picking a shirt. And this dude stopped and talked me in the grocery store for 20 minutes.
Yeah, I saw a guy in the communal area of my apartment building. He was using the barbecue and he had a little tin aluminum or metal pail bucket.
Mm-hmm.
Star Wars bucket, like the popcorn bucket, promotional bucket from one of the movie releases. And I walked up and was like, hey, dude, are you a Star Wars fan? Because I wanted to be like, you're putting coals in the pan, man. Like, you're ruining the bucket. Like,
that bucket's
he's
cool.
Like, no, not really. I just needed a bucket. I was like, oh. And I just kind of like, well, I live in the building. I just wanted to say hi. That's all.
Have a good day.
Oh, nice to meet you. And I walked away like.
Yeah, you got to ease on down. Well, it's like I say all the time. I interact with tons of people who are Star Wars fans like I am, but I have to stop myself and remember there's way fewer of us than other people that are just like, oh yeah, I saw that movie one time. They're not like thinking about it every other day or, whatever. But that's okay. It's all good. There's room for everybody.
Even recently, my wife and I, we were house hunting and I think we were looking at an open house and 2 of the bedrooms were just covered in Star Wars memorabilia. But the people weren't home. It was an agent. I almost wanted to be like, why aren't the people home? I want to talk to them. I want to say hi. Can we be friends? Like,
do you think they'd leave some of that behind if we buy their house? Like, right? We can throw that into the contract.
One room was like all action figures and helmets displayed, and in that room was a TV with a PlayStation, like a PlayStation 4. Right. And the other room was like Star Wars posters and art and other collectibles and props on the wall. And there was a TV in that room with an Xbox. So I'm like, what is this, 2 people or is this one person that's just awesome in both ways? Like,
yeah, there's a story there. There's something that needs to be gotten to the bottom of.
Yeah, and I'm like, I have to know. Like, we need to buy this house just so I can ask.
So I can find out more about this. That's fantastic. Well, Yoshi, I cannot thank you enough for taking the time to hang out tonight. To talk. I don't know if you have anything that you're working on that you want to plug. I certainly want to give you the space to do that, but also tell us, where people can find you on Twitter if they want to, send you other questions or interact. You're a great person to follow on Twitter, so I highly recommend it. But, tell us what you've got coming up or what you're working on.
So I'm currently working on a game called Ashes of Creation at a studio called Intrepid. MMO fantasy game. It's kind of like World of Warcraft. So yeah, I got to do my fantasy. Nice. That's one of the reasons I applied to them. They asked me that during the interview too. Why do you want to work here? I want to work in fantasy.
I haven't done fantasy yet.
Do I need more of an answer?
I can tell you more, but isn't that enough?
So I'm working on that. I also am filming something possibly the end of this month or next month.
Okay.
I'm not sure yet. It's a martial arts movie starring a guy named Kung Lee. He used to fight in the UFC. He's been an actor in a few things, so he's doing his own film now. And I was brought on for visual effects to help out, but apparently I'm also going to be in the movie. So that's kind of cool. I have a fight scene. That's fun.
Outstanding.
So that's pretty much it. As far as what's upcoming, thanks to quarantine, we don't really know what's happening nowadays. So it is what it is. So yeah, I'm trying to find something else interesting to say, but I guess that's it. Oh, there was Ro from Scarif did say, why isn't David on Twitter? And I just have to ask, have you not been on Twitter? That is why. Have you not seen it? Come on. It is a cesspool on there at times.
It is a hellscape many times.
It is a place where you
Um,
can say you like dogs, and people say you hate kittens and want to see kittens
yeah.
drown.
Why are you trying to kill kittens?
Yeah, why are you anti-kittens? Why do you hate animals? Like what?
That's right. Like what's going on here? So it can be really fun and a lot of stuff, a lot of fun a lot of times, and then other times you're just like you said, like, why am I here? Like, what am I doing here? So, but again, my goal is to crowd that out. Let's have fun. Let's make jokes. Let's share the silly memes. Let's use it for something that's helpful. But at the same time, let's call out the things that need to be called out, because there is also the opportunity for us to stand up for those who may not have a voice, don't have an opportunity to speak up, or being, ganged up on. Like there's opportunities to do a lot of good in there.
Oh,
So I haven't left Twitter.
I've been there.
Yeah. Well, it's important. And, I think that, we can all, band together. I go back a lot of times. One of my favorite all-time television shows is The West Wing. And I've probably seen every episode of The West Wing 25 or 30 times. Something, I love the show. It's one of those ones that, I'll fall asleep to it sometimes, or if I'm doing something and I want something on the background. But there's a great scene in an episode of The West Wing where one of the staffers and one of the congressmen are having this big debate, just in his office, going back and forth. And he uses the example of the NRA. And he says, Democrats always talk about the NRA and this and this and that. He was like, get all of the Democrats to join the NRA. He said, and the next day, call a vote on something and change it from the inside because you joined it, instead of standing on the outside, like you said, yelling and being mad. Like, let's take action. Let's find ways that we can make Twitter better for everybody, whether it's being positive, whether it's sharing out positive stories. There's a lot of opportunity to, push out the bad. And, sometimes it's just a matter of reporting and blocking them too. It's the little things. But Yoshi, I can't thank you enough again for being here tonight, for hanging out with us.
It's a pleasure.
I encourage everybody to follow you on Twitter. You're a great follow, interact. You're always kind to interact and share things and answer questions. So everybody do that. To all of you in the live chat, thank you for sticking with us tonight and hanging out. For those that are going to listen on the audio feed, you can always come back to YouTube and watch the video if you want to, listen to it on audio. Follow us on YouTube, subscribe to our page. You can find us on Twitter at WillsPod. We love to interact with you as well. I think we have an Anchor voicemail box somewhere that you could leave us a message. We'd love to do some questions live on the show some night. But in the meantime, thanks for hanging out. I hope everybody has a great next week, and I look forward to seeing everybody next week. And in the meantime, may the force be with you always.